Welcome back to Emotional Runway, the entrepreneur's guide to mental health. In today's episode, Krista and I talk about mom-trepreneurship, I guess. That is being a mom and being an entrepreneur. Our guest today is Dana Thompson, the founder of Everything on the Spectrum, and Dana works with children with autism. We'll talk about being in the business of helping people and the challenges that come along with that. Hope you enjoy. Hey, Krista, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing great, thank you. Today we are talking about something that is very interesting to me as I watch my wife have her own photography business, and I know it's interesting to you as you are also a mom. So today we are talking about mom-trepreneurship. Say that 10 times fast, or don't.
Which no one can say except Matt at this point.
Mom-entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship as a mom. Let's leave. All right, whatever. We'll figure it out as we go along. But I think inherent in that is the idea of work-life balance, which we've talked about, but also just kind of making sure you're taking care of yourself and the idea of self-care as an entrepreneur. But you add the stress of being a mom on top of that too. So I want to talk about the self-care aspect. You are a mental health professional, but you are also a mom-trepreneur. Correct. So tell me what that's like.
It's really hard is what it's like. I never know exactly, even with my background as a mental health professional, I really never feel like I have a good grip on how to best approach it or balance out things that are coming my way regarding work, regarding my family, figuring out in that space, like how to take care of myself.
Is there time for that?
There is time that I have to carve out for myself. I wouldn't look at my schedule and say, oh, look at that. I have 2 hours to do exactly what I want to do. Maybe I'll take a bubble bath and, whatever, listen to or watch a Netflix, that's
that
never
happens once a year, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, lucky. I think it's real, right? I have a lot of friends of mine who ask me all the time, like, what show have you binge watched lately? And I'm like, you have time for that? Like, who does that? I don't even know what that's like.
This is your life. Krista Moulton's show is the one you're binge watching.
Yeah. Yes.
So because we haven't talked about your business a lot on here yet, and I want to do that, and your kids. So you have how many kids?
So I have 3 children. I have a private practice in downtown, and I also opened a house. It's a pocket community for autistic adults called Sustainable Independence. It's here locally in Huntsville. That has been up and running probably for about 4 months. It has been a real learning curve, a lot to juggle, just new things, right? Like writing policies and procedures and fielding, kind of just situations that come up with the residents and triaging and kind of more of like a case management role, communicating with families. Like it's a lot in addition to just, working a practice and coming home and, the drive home, right? Like it's what I've felt is really helpful is to get into a better space mentally where I'm like, I need to be intentional about putting work away and then figuring out, like, just rehearsing for me the questions that I walk through the door with my family to make that connection, which is for my kids, it's like, hey, how was your day? Like, tell me about school. What's going on? And that is that's something I do daily, but I will tell you every day driving home, I have to be intentional about practicing that before I step through the door. Knowing what it feels like, knowing what I'm going through emotionally or what just happened in my day to kind of regroup and be like, okay, that was a really hard session, or I just had a really difficult conversation with a family member, but I have to figure out how to compartmentalize that in order to present myself as a mom with the full scope of emotional availability that it takes to keep connected to your family.
So it's actually the process of like debriefing from the day with yourself and then like pre-briefing for walking into the house.
Yeah. And I don't know if either of you have had jobs where it's like you really don't have a commute. Like at first I loathed a commute and I was like, oh, this is so like long and blah. And it's really so critical. It was that time, right, that was given because I had to commute to be able to, review those things and check in with myself and how am I feeling, and what do I need to provide to my family, and also maybe review the day of like, what did I not do for myself today? Because when you're juggling work and family, I'm definitely, I do this to myself. I'm the last one I take care of, right?
Yeah. No, and I think, that's kind of been a theme, right, of these first several episodes is like we're neglecting our own needs because we're worried about the business and we're worried about all of our employees and we're worried about our families and we're worried about money. And the last person we're checking in with is ourselves. And that's kind of, I think what we're encouraging people to do is to make yourself a priority, whatever that looks like for you. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, because there's like a couple of compounding factors here. So first of all, you're running a business. Now you've added podcast hosts to your couple businesses, right? You've added podcast hosts to your list of stuff to do, but you also have twin teenagers.
Yes.
And a 7-year-old.
And add travel sports on top of that. And
how are you still standing?
I am.
Why are you doing this podcast?
Yeah. Well, we know why we're doing this podcast, which is no one ever talks about this side, the reality of it's hard and there's a struggle associated with it. And I don't want people to feel alone. Like, we started this thinking if we could tell a story and allow people to understand they're not alone. And if one person, this is what I feel really passionate about, if one person can learn that it's okay to ask for help or there's hope that this is not going to be the forever.
Right.
We've done what we set out to do, Yeah,
and you're all right. So as far as where you are in the business, because you have two businesses, right? Because you have your private practice, which is sort of, I would say at least from the outside, seems like a fairly cut and dried, you take on as many patients as you want to. There's billing and I'm sure that kind of stuff. But like, as far as starting this nonprofit that you've started, that seems like a lot of work because you have to manage the actual physical house itself. You have to manage the people that are staying there and their families and all that kind of stuff. So, you're not in the place that I'm at, which is where you're out like tap dancing for investors and fundraising and all that kind of stuff, which is it's a different hell. But but you're in the early startup phase, which is actually it's an animal in and of itself. So what's that been like for you?
It has been really, really hard for me. Like, I feel like I'm pretty resilient and resourceful and I can figure things out. But this is really this has been a huge challenge. So this is a nonprofit. So that is part of setting up the organizational structure, establishing the board, people who want to buy into the nonprofit. And then, nonprofit work is a huge fundraising piece of it, right? To sustain the nonprofit. And one of the board members, he's like, I have a present for you. And I was like, oh, really? And I'm thinking, like, is it like a bottle of like booze or something? Like, I don't know. Like, what I could do.
I'd be like, it better be a check.
And he hands me this book. It's so thick and it's all about developing boards. And I was literally like, oh, shit. I am not cut out for this. I'm like, you think I'm going to read that? No. Oh, no.
This is why, actually, funny you mentioned that, because this is why I've done audiobooks. Because like I'm in the car so much, just going between places and driving to Atlanta where my headquarters is. And I'm like, all right, cool. If it's happening on audiobooks because I'm not, I can't sit and read a book. That doesn't exist in my life. So, and what's interesting too, because you and I have been talking about this off the air a little bit too, is like watching you go through some of the stuff that I've already been through, which is you got to figure out your marketing plan. You got to like a lot of that. Yeah. A lot of that stuff is on autopilot for me now. So now I'm fundraising to keep it going. And doing business development to keep it going, but you're just figuring all this stuff out. So, like that's a whole different exercise.
Yeah. And I will say the difference too is in my private practice, a majority of my marketing has never been like, if you look for me, I don't have a website, right? Like, and that's because we live in a small community. And a lot of my work, particularly, I do a lot of volunteer work in the community, trying to establish access to services and develop policies that give, a better quality of life for people who are going through mental health experiences for individuals and families. And a lot of my marketing is literally just face-to-face meeting people. I've never had to really set out time to really work on aggressively like building a marketing plan and a website and all that stuff, which is obviously not now the case, that I have this nonprofit and it's trying to figure out, how do I do this, you know, in the midst of, you know, trying to just take care of the kids and run my practice and vet new residents for our house that are appropriate. And that's a whole nother screening process. It's developing screening tools and kind of regrouping and learning as you go. You know, there's always something to learn every single day, and regroup and redo the business plan and all that stuff. So.
Well, I think it's fascinating. I think one of the things that interests me about your business and our guest's business, who we're going to talk to here in just a second, is you have very fixed capacity.
Yeah.
Right? Like, for me, the goal is get as much business as I possibly can and hire more people and do all that. But you have finite amount of slots in these houses. Dana, you have a finite amount of people you can take in your practice. So, you know, it takes that challenge away a little bit, but it also means that you got to pick the right few people to fill those slots.
Correct. That is a very important part. I think, Dana, you would agree with this.
Absolutely.
Of doing your due diligence on the front end and making sure, you know, screening tools and you're asking the appropriate questions. And I will say a lot of that just comes with experience. I don't know, Dana, would you say that is the case for you also?
Yeah, and actually, before you answer that, I should take this opportunity to introduce you to our listeners. So with us today, we have a friend of mine and also a mom-trepreneur, Dana Thompson, who's the founder of Everything on the Spectrum. Both of you work in the autism spectrum field, which is fascinating to me, so I'm sure there's a lot to cover there. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so what I've learned is needing to have a real clear idea of what the questions you're going to ask on screening, like what your, I guess, ideal client or participant is. And I found that that's constantly evolving since I opened the houses, and I'm learning each day. But that is a really important thing to nail down for the success of whatever business you're running.
Absolutely. You know, I think given that you have this finite amount of space, you know, how can I make sure that I'm best serving you? Are we really a good fit for each other? You know, every clinician's not going to be great for every patient, and that's okay. But how do we get all the information we need up front to make those choices?
Yeah.
Well, I think, again, like adding a layer to, you know, just the struggles of running a business to begin with. Now you're running a business with people who need a lot of attention and a lot of help. And so your quote unquote customers are needy. And I don't mean that in a negative way. That's the business that you've both chosen to go into, but that adds a layer of stress too. I mean, my customers are needy, but not like every minute of every day needy. So what is that? I mean, what is that like for you from a mental exhaustion standpoint every single day, both of you?
Yeah. And I think it's really easy working in the field that both of us are in. You know, the children that I work with, I genuinely fall in love with them, and you pour everything that you have into them. And I think that the term that I've heard of before is compassion fatigue, where at the end of the day, you've given your all. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to drive in complete silence because that's what I need to reset my brain and get excited before I walk in the door of my own house.
Yep. Yeah, and I should also mention, you have two kids as well.
I do. I have a 5-year-old and an 11-year-old.
Yeah, and they're, you know, I think kids of those particular ages, as all three of us have kids those similar ages, you know, they need a lot still. They're not, you know, autonomous vehicles at this point.
Right, absolutely. And then you've got the dogs and the husband and the whole shebang. And
the homework,
and right?
You get home from work and he pulls out the binder and I'm like, not the binder.
No, 6th grade math. No.
I don't have space for this right now, okay? Yeah.
I didn't know how to do 6th grade math in 6th grade. So
well, no. And going back to your clients, this is something that I, you know, with the kiddos you work with, it's never just, it's usually the kids that I find or my clients that I really enjoy, and they're like kind of an ease to work with. But there's always this extension of the caregivers and the family. And oftentimes I find that their lens, like they've been so close to this person for so long, they've raised them and grown up with them. It's really hard for them to understand really truly what the needs are. And a lot of my time is spent educating and redirecting and seeking resources for those individuals to become more aware of how they can best serve, like not just themselves, but like the person that they've taken care of, and that becomes a lot of time that you really just you don't expect,
Absolutely. And, I will say, so I am a board certified behavior analyst. I do ABA therapy. Now, you can apply this to all different types of people, but I work mostly with kids on the spectrum. And yes, that, it's not just this child that I have to focus on. It's the whole family unit. And if I'm not really wrapping my arms around the whole entire thing, we're not going to see the progress that we need to see. And my end game is always independence. How independent can I get this little being to become? And so I think I'm really clear in the beginning that parent involvement and parent training is a required component. We all have to get on board together. And I am actively working to try to work myself out of a job. I don't want you to be with me forever.
Yeah. Yes. And that is really important way to approach the work, because I think there's a lot of practitioners out there that they see this as, they have to continue to retain people in order to thrive in their business. But that doesn't lead to what you're saying, with the critical nature of leading towards independence, right? Like being self-sustaining, being able to, do life with minimal support.
Absolutely.
No, it's really fascinating too, because I mean, having zero experience compared to all of the experience that both of you have, just hearing from the outside, I mean, there's a lot of components to it. And what I find interesting again is, like, I know I said this earlier too, but it's like you guys have finite capacity. You have, a fixed number of people that you're dealing with. And the idea of, having to go out and solicit business is like a foreign concept, because you said you have a waiting list.
My wait list, honestly, it's going to sound dramatic, but it breaks my heart. Yeah. Here in our area, we've got a limited number of providers and a growing need. This area is growing daily, and there's not enough of us here to be able to service the community. So yeah, it weighs on me, but it's something that I have to balance. Yes, I have this wait list, and can I take in more? Yeah, but will my quality of care be compromised? 100%. Right. So I'm trying to navigate, how do I grow this? Yeah. How do I add on so that I can meet the need of more, but keep that quality of care really high?
Right, and that's the balance, I think, right?
I think I was just in a meeting addressing this actual issue, right? How do we increase, availability of providers and meet the needs of the community? And I think it's roughly at least a 2-year wait list for any kid to get into ABA services.
And that time is precious.
Yeah, precious. And as we know, it's Rocket City. There's a lot of autism here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, as David mentioned on our last episode. So I want to talk about the business for a moment. So you guys moved here from California. How did you decide to start the business, and what was that process like for you?
That is such a good question. And I don't know that I could say there was a moment where I said I want to start a business. We moved out here, and I had the intention of staying home for a while and, I guess kicking my feet up and being a stay-at-home mom. And I have a hard time sitting still, and I really love what I do. And so I started doing a little bit of consultation once we moved out here, just a few hours a week, and I quickly saw the need, and I couldn't keep telling people that I couldn't work with their kid. And so at that point I decided, okay.
How did you get involved in this line of work? Like what got you to the
So way back when I was in my undergrad, I thought I knew what I wanted to do, like so many young people do. Definitely did not. Yeah. And oddly enough, I had been working as a swim teacher and a lifeguard for 5 years, and I ended up working with a lot of the little ones that had special needs in the pool, and I fell in love with it. Thought I wanted to do PR. Not for me. So I, quickly came to that realization and looked back on what I loved and decided to take it out of the pool and learn a little bit more about the special needs community. Mm-hmm. And so from there, I ended up, California, their mental health structuring is a little different than it is here in Alabama.
Agreed.
But I was able to get a whole bunch of great exposure. I had some wonderful training that gave me the tools that I needed to feel like I can do this on my own. And so I ended up getting a teaching credential in special education, and then I decided that I wanted to keep going, and I got my BCBA not too long after that. And it's a field that you figure out real quick if you love it or if it's not for you. There's a pretty high turnover rate, but it's a great job.
So you decided, okay, there was a need in this community. You were going to start a business.
Mm-hmm.
What was the next step? Did you have to go to a facility?
So, that's a great question. So this business started with the minimum $200 deposit that you can open a business checking account with, and we started small. I hired a couple people. We're funded completely by insurance. We do have some private pay, but insurance should be paying for it. So for a while there, we did just in-home, where we would go out to the kids' homes. Sometimes we'll take it into the community. So say we're having a hard time going grocery shopping with mom, or anywhere else that's real pertinent to their life. So we did just that for the first, I want to say about 2 years, saved some money, and then slowly started looking at spaces, and we opened a clinical space here just about a year ago now.
And what that adds stress, right?
Yeah.
You've got overhead now.
And I will be the first to say that I don't necessarily think my mind is as wired for business as it is for therapy.
Yeah.
I'll do therapy all day long. But if you want to start talking about, budgeting and invoicing and all, that's my nightmare, scheduling. So, sorry, I've totally gone down the other lane.
Executive functioning.
Yes. I can teach it. Okay. Do I have the executive functioning?
I relate totally 100%.
But that's you can bring that in though. You can get that help. So
Absolutely. And so my husband has been like my right arm through a lot of the business side of everything.
Know your strengths,
Yes.
know your challenges,
Yes.
build on your strengths, and ask for help to, support the challenges.
Hire your weaknesses as well.
Correct.
That's
That's
the term.
good.
I
Good,
like
Matt.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hire your
And that's
weaknesses.
what I did essentially. I knew that I couldn't take on all of it. So he's really helped me through that. But yeah, opening up that clinical space was a game changer. We were able to take on more kids because of it. And our team has grown. But yeah, no, that's a whole different layer.
What was the family transition? Like, tell me a little bit about what the conversation was with your husband, because you're moving here. That's a big transition, culture shift, because California is, again,
Different than
Alabama.
What?
What conversations did you have with your husband? Like, what did you think about personally about what this was going to take, for you to get this started and potentially pull you maybe away from being as involved with the kids? How do you transition them to school? Because those are real things that as moms or parents, like, we deal with, right?
Absolutely. So I think with our move to Alabama, we really were able to restructure a whole lot. I think we went from this very, very busy life that we had in California. We were in the thick of it every single day, and he was traveling a lot. A lot of that changed when we moved here. He's home a lot more now. To be totally honest, I was much more apprehensive about starting the business, but he's, I don't know, I would say he's my biggest cheerleader, and he's like, do it. You got this. He's the risk taker. I'm not the risk taker. And so I listened and I said, okay, let's do it. And we've made it work between us. Is it always perfect? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I also think letting your kids learn from some of those imperfections and seeing, mom has this thing that she works toward, dad has this thing that he works toward. They're both working really hard. It's not always perfect. But I think, there's a lot of value in them seeing that.
What do you find is the most, like, what you go to stay connected with your family when you're so busy with your career and doing the work that you do?
That is such a good question. Oh, gosh. I think in the day-to-day trying to find the moments to slow down. But I think having things to look forward to together. What we're going to go do over the weekend. Are we all going to get on our bikes together? What are we going to go do together? Having those special experiences, for me, helps me get through the week.
Yeah.
But I think trying to be conscious of appreciating those everyday routines that otherwise can feel a little mundane, maybe taking a minute to really enjoy bedtime tonight.
Yes.
I also think, and you might see this as well, I think coming from a mental health background, you know, I've got a different viewpoint on appreciating those small things with my kids. You know, I've seen a child that struggled with this all day long, and look at you. You just did that, and I didn't even have to help. It makes me feel very grateful for all the things that my kids can do and that they can naturally be independent with.
Yeah, and the mindset, like a healthy mindset, is when you're hunting the small things, you know. And one of the John and Julie Gottman, they do relationship work, but they said that think about it as collecting pennies. Every small thing has value, and the more pennies you can collect, the more value you're adding. And could be, you're right, like just how you spend, like putting your child to bed, or how you show up in the morning when they wake up. You know, whatever that case may be, it's the small things that make the biggest impact.
That's a great analogy, because I've actually heard the opposite version of that analogy, which is you only wake up every day with a certain amount of spoons. And every time somebody needs something from you, you're giving away spoons. And at the end of the day, if you're out of spoons, you're out of spoons. But I like that idea that you, instead of giving away spoons, you're collecting pennies. I think that's really cool.
And you're seeking, right? You have to put effort into finding those small things. They're just not easily visible.
And I also think don't let yourself sweat the small stuff. Like, I'm a huge believer in picking your battles. Like, what battle do I want to fight today? Is this really something that I want to get into when I get home? Or do I need to set the stage to have a little bit of an easier evening? Kind of going into it with that thought of being intentional about what your expectation is.
Yeah.
So, this may seem like a weird question, Dana, but like, do you stress more about running the business, or do you stress more about not being able to help as many people, or are those the same thing? Like, because, you know, I mean, I know that, like, from where I'm coming from, right? I mean, my thing is, like, do we have enough money coming in? Do we have enough people? Do we have too many people? Do we have enough projects? You don't have that problem. And so it's fascinating to me. I keep coming back to this. Like, is that do you worry about running the business?
To a certain degree. I mean, I will say we're funded by insurance, which is its own beast, and can be unpredictable at times. But no, I mean, I'm not as worried about making sure that I'm going to have people to serve, because it's there. It does wear on me. And I think, you know, making the conscious effort of when I leave to be able to let myself let go of some of those things that may have been really hard that I saw that day.
Yeah, and that sounds like common to both of you, which is, you know, leaving work at work is difficult when it's people's lives on the line and people's mental health on the line.
Can you talk a little bit, we talked about this, in how values guide your work? Because I think that's part of the answer to that question, Matt.
So I've been doing a lot of reading lately about values and how your core values as a person. So those, you know, pick 3 or 4. What are those core values to you that are important? For me, things that come up are things like compassion, kindness, being a leader, inclusion. Those are all core pieces of my personality. And, you know, if the things that I do in and out throughout my day, the ins and outs, if they're aligned with those core values, not only is it going to help me grow my business into what I want it to be, I think I'm going to find a lot more fulfillment out
Meaning
of
and
that
purpose.
business. Meaning and purpose. Yeah. And if those things that I'm doing day in and day out aren't aligned with those core values, I'm swimming upstream all day long, feeling like I'm banging my head into a wall.
Well, and I you know, I have to say, like, from my perspective, having the core value and, like, you know, at the core of my business is helping firefighters and police officers go home safely every night to their families. And I think if it weren't for those core values, I probably would have given up a long time ago, to be honest. I mean, that's what drives me. I think you have to have that passion in your business, because nobody ever got into business. I mean, I could be wrong, but nobody ever got into business to be like, man, I just want to fundraise all day long and I just want to run a business. Like, no, I don't think most entrepreneurs get into it for the fun of running a business. It's because we're passionate about something. And I think this goes back to, you know, what I said in the initial LinkedIn posts that created, you know, that led to this podcast, which is, you know, we worry a little bit about what other people will think when they see that we're struggling. But for my money, I'd rather, you know, pay a business or give my business to a business owner who is passionate about what they do and who is willing to risk it all and is willing to, you know, compromise some of their work-life balance to achieve a goal. And I think that's what's so evident in the work that you guys are doing, which is like, yeah, this is really hard. There are probably easier jobs out there. There are probably jobs where you could apply your skills even working for somebody else, but you saw a need and you made the decision that you're passionate enough about it that you need to do something about it, which is awesome.
Absolutely. And I think being able to see your vision come to life and know that it's going to be what you're going to make it. Nobody else is dictating that. There's something very empowering in that. And being able to build something that you're proud of. I always say I'm not putting my name on anything that I'm not proud of. My name will not go on it if it's something that I don't feel like I stand for. And that feels good.
Yeah, and it's business becomes the vehicle of personal growth too, right? Resilience is built at least every day for me, right? Like, I can't believe I got through that. Like, wow, didn't do half bad of a job, and I really didn't know what I was supposed to be doing there, And so those are huge accomplishments, of personal growth.
Is there a lesson in there as far as like gaming it out in your head ahead of time? I mean, we talked about this, I think, an episode or two ago, where this idea of familiar panic, where you like panicking about something, but you're like, I've done this before and I got through it before. So is there an element of planning to that, like for the hard stuff?
Yeah, I think it's to our benefit to sit there and do the what ifs. Have I been through this before? Like, what were the challenges I faced? How did I get through that? Like, knowing what are the things that you do to cope with difficult times, is it deep breathing? Is it meditation? Is it mantra of I can do hard things? I've been through this before. This is a familiar space, a familiar feeling, but I know I've been through that before.
Yeah, no, and so I think, again, I always love to try and get the take homes out of, we always have these great conversations. So it's, I think so far we've covered, planning ahead, giving yourself the space to, take the time that you need. I love this idea of like using the car ride home to debrief, which is why I got an office instead of working at home, because I needed that separation. I mean, I think to some extent entrepreneurs can't really ever separate it. That actually leads me to another question too, which is both of you being the certified mental health specialist at the center of your businesses makes it really hard to take vacations, makes it really hard to not be there when you have stuff going on with your kids or your lives. What is that like? Because I mean, I have an amazing staff, for all the difficulty that, it is to run a business. I have a great staff that I can rely on. But you have to be there, like, to provide the therapy. So how do you handle that and not being able to step away?
So I think my model might look a little bit different, but I certainly am not able to shut it off. They're called registered behavior technicians that work under me, and they're the ones that are carrying out the treatment plan that I develop. So while I may not always be there for the entirety of one of their sessions with a child, if I'm not physically present in the building, yeah, you bet. I've got to have my watch strapped to my wrist and my phone on me, knowing that, yeah, I am the safety net if something comes up. And, like you had mentioned earlier, talking about building those procedures and safeguards and policies, you've got to have a support system in place that allows your business to have the support that it needs, but also hopefully gives you a second to be able to maybe breathe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
One thing that I found really helpful for me is just looking at the school schedule and be like, okay, well, during school breaks and holidays, my guide is I tend not to be at the office during those times because it helps me from an external source to set that schedule.
Right. It's their fault. It's the school system's fault that I'm not here today.
Sorry, my kids are home. I can't come in today.
Yeah, no, I think that helps for sure. Well, guys, this has been really interesting. I mean, I think there's so much to unpack here, which is like, I find this fascinating too, that there's the business of running the business, and then there's the business of mental health. And you got, it's hard to not take a lot of that home with you. But I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. And, if there's anything else you want to jump in and talk about?
No, thanks for having me. And I applaud both of you for the efforts that you're making, because there really is a need here in addressing mental health for entrepreneurs.
I think all we can do is talk about it, right? And hopefully people will listen, and hopefully we'll help somebody, and we'll get more people on the podcast who, want to give their perspective and help us through whatever that looks like. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you next time. Thanks so much for joining us today. Big thanks to Dana for coming on. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and share with anybody you know who may need this resource. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes, please reach out to us at emotionalrunway@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.